Hi, I'm Pat Gwyer, clinical psychologist, and today I'd like to talk about mindfulness. What I'd like to do today is talk about the three types of mindful attention, the three types of mind that you'll become aware of when you use mindfulness, the four processes of mindfulness, some of the core skills you need for mindfulness. Then I'd like to talk about some of the types of mindfulness and the importance of practice and the different stages of learning. So if we think about the different types of mindful attention we have, first of all, expansive mindful awareness. And think of this as maybe a wide-angle camera lens. It's taking in the big picture. It's taking in all the information and seeing all of the things that are happening. It's a bit like a landscape painter. What the landscape painter does is they notice that the colour of the trees and it matches the background, the mountains, the river, and the whole landscape. And a single piece by itself is part of the bigger picture. It's looking at the whole of the picture. So expansive mindfulness is very much looking at the big picture. The second type of mindful attention that you can use is constrictive. Now, this is the opposite of a wide-angle lens. This is very much like a zoom lens, a microscope. So what this is doing is under the microscope, or magnifying glass, slightly easier to draw. So there's my magnifying glass, and I'm focusing on the fine detail. I really am noticing things. So when we use mindfulness or our mindful attention, we can expand out and look at the big picture. And this becomes really important when we think about all of the things that are important for our well-being, our success, and our happiness. We can think of the biological things that are important to us: sleep, diet, routine, exercise, treating physical illness. We can think of the social things, our connections, our relationships, our family. We can think of the psychological things, our ability to manage our unhelpful thoughts, our ability to manage our emotions. And we can think of our spiritual, the thing, the bigger picture, the how the world makes sense and meaning and purpose. So in the expansive, we can look at the bio, psycho, social, and spiritual. And we can join up all of those separate dots and see how they form a whole and how they contribute to the creation of our sense of who we are, where we'd like to be. Some of the questions you can ask yourself if you want to use expansive mindfulness is you might wish to say, who do I want to be? What is my best possible self? What is the best possible version of me that could be? And how close am I to that? Then you could think about what goals you could use to get there. So what you'd be doing is looking at the expansive, the best possible me, the best possible physically fit, psychologically, socially, spiritually fit and aware. What is my ideal best possible self? Then I could use the constrictive mindful attention to look at the fine details, the steps that I might need to take and how each step leads to another step and another step. And every now and again, I'll need to pull back out and look at the expansive part of the big picture. The final one is the type of mindfulness that most people are familiar with, and it's the one that most people use. The mindfulness, bare attention, is this idea of noticing, observing, describing, putting into words, and just letting go. Now you can do that with all of these types of mindfulness. The skills that they all use are very similar. You observe and notice. You don't get caught up in something. You don't make judgments about it. You don't let your beliefs, assumptions, or thoughts or emotions cloud what it is you're observing. And you don't act on what you're observing. You just notice it. And you don't act in a mindless autopilot way. Bare attention is the one that most people are familiar with and which is very, very popular. One of the problems with just having this bare attention is sometimes people can think of mindfulness as very selfish, very me-focused, very me-orientated. And that's the reason why expansive mindfulness was always in the original understanding of mindfulness. This isn't just about me. This just isn't about noticing and letting go or taking responsibility for my actions or not taking responsibilities for my actions or non-actions. It was about the big picture. How does what I do, what I don't do, how I behave fit into the big picture? That's very hard if you just use bare attention. So really mindfulness involves noticing, observing and letting go. It observes the fine detail, being a bit like a watchmaker and really zooming in and seeing how all the different cogs fit together, and then expanding out and looking at the big picture. And it's the combination of these types of mindful attention that can really help you on that journey to achieving your best possible self. Really help you manage your stress, your anxiety. There's lots of things that mindfulness is very good for doing. And one of the skills is to know these 3 different types of mindful attention and to be able to switch between them as appropriate. So that's the 3 types of mindful attention. And the next thing is the 3 types of mind. So the 3 types of mind are logical, emotional, and the balance between the 2 is wise. So the ancient Greeks talked about to have true wisdom, to have true knowledge, you needed logic and facts, but you needed compassion and emotion. Lots of people think mindfulness is something that's very only associated with Eastern religions and Buddhism. If you look back to the ancient Greeks and their ancient gods, they very much talk, they use different words and different explanations, but Athena, the goddess of wisdom, talks about to be truly wise and to have wisdom and to act in the right way, you need logic, but you need to be balanced with emotions. Pretty much every major religion around the world talks about the importance of balancing logic and fact with emotion. You can even see it in programs where you might have Mr. Spock is the logical one, Bones, Jim, might be more emotional, and Kurt, Captain Kurt, is it Kurt or Kurt? Captain Kurt is the wise mind. You can see it in Harry Potter as well. You might have Hermione, Ron, and Harry. So it's something that's in our popular culture. One of the things many of you have probably heard, or there's a very common saying, is hearts and minds. So sometimes people think mindfulness is something which is to do with Buddhism, which is to do with Eastern philosophies, and it has a role in that. But like many other things, it has a long, long history through European culture, through other religions. So it's actually something which may be considered outside of any one particular religion, and even this idea of, you know, hearts and minds, that you need a balance between your heart and your mind to have true wisdom. So there's the differences between the 3 types of mind, and again, you can have the expansive, constrictive, and bare attention. So you have 3 types of attention and 3 types of mind. The next thing I want to talk about is the 4 processes. And this is really important for a number of reasons. One of the first reasons is people often talk, there's an old saying, and it goes something along the lines, they pray in church on Sunday, but they prey on people for the rest of the week. And what I mean by that is many people might practice mindful compassion, they might practice loving kindness, they might do the mindful meditations. One of the things I've noticed is sometimes people do those mindful meditations, but they don't really follow them up with their actions. So the idea is you can't plough a field by turning it over in your mind. If you do a loving kindness, if you do a compassion meditation, if you do those very kind and generous giving type mindful reflections, you need to be able to put those into action. So mindfulness requires 4 processes. First of all, sorry, I'll start the other way around. It begins with awareness. So there's a sense that you need to be aware of what's going on around you. You need to be aware of yourself. You need to be aware of your internal self and your external reality. So the only thing I really have control over in my life is my actions, my thoughts, my emotions, and my body sensations. I can't control what other people do to me. I can't control what other people say to me. I can only control my reactions. So I need to be awareness of what can I control and what can't I control. I can't control what other people think of me, so I have to notice that and let it go. But I might become aware of it and I might reflect on it. And I might think, do you know what? Lots of people are saying this about me. I'm aware of this and I'm going to reflect on it. And maybe I need to change some of my behaviors. Maybe I need to look at myself and do things differently. So I'm going to reflect on it. When I have awareness and reflection, I develop insight. And insight is understanding how all of the separate pieces of the jigsaw, all of those pieces that make us who we are, how they fit together. Insight is being able to understand how things from our past, our worries about the future or our anticipations and excitement about the future, how everything fits together and how we kind of hang together as a human being. And this helps with those questions that I mentioned earlier. What is your best possible self? Who do you want to be? How close are you to being that best possible self? How can you do it? And the final thing you need is action. So action without awareness, reflection, and insight frequently leads to some really unpleasant, unhelpful consequences. Awareness, reflection, insight without action doesn't achieve anything. Nothing changes. We can sit and think and pontificate and wonder about things till the cows come home. But unless we take action, we will never do anything. And if we take action without insight, reflection, and awareness, again, that action is going to be unwise. One of the things for this action, we really want it to be wise action. And wise action is interesting because sometimes when we're stressed, when we're anxious, when we're worried, when we're angry, when we're tired, when we're lonely, when we're frustrated, some of the actions we can take are actually very unwise, and they lead to unwise behaviors, unwise or unhelpful consequences. So really, we want to be doing wise action. Sometimes being aware of that is really important. Sometimes being aware of that, reflecting on it, having insight into it, and doing nothing is doing something. Doing nothing unhelpful is doing something helpful. So sometimes, even though we may have the urge to do something, when we have awareness, reflection, insight, our action can be to deliberately pause, to step back, to notice, observe, to have awareness of what's going on, awareness of how we're feeling, awareness of our thoughts and our emotions, to be able to reflect upon those, have insight on them, and wait until the right time to take wise action. The final thing I want to talk about is the 4 stages of learning, and this is really quite important. So we have 4 stages of learning, and many of you, I'm sure, have heard of these. So the first one is unconscious incompetence. So it's unconscious And when we have unconscious incompetence, we don't know that we don't know. So we don't know what we don't know. We don't know that we don't know how to do something. So for some of you who may be new to mindfulness, or maybe new to the 3 types of mind that I've talked about, or the 3 types of mindful attention, I'm sure most of you will have heard of bare attention. I think for a few of you, you would have heard of the expansive and the constrictive types of mindfulness. When you become aware that you don't know, you move from this state of unconscious incompetence to practicing. So you move to conscious incompetence. And that conscious incompetence, I'm aware that I'm learning something new, I'm aware that it's something different, and I'm learning a new skill. Often when we do this, we'll have that narrative in our head, we'll talk ourselves through the process. You can see this on advanced driving courses when you're driving and you actually have to talk out loud what you're doing, because that helps you learn, that helps you retain the information. Then with practice, we start to get to conscious competence. And when we have conscious competence, we start to become aware that we're not doing it right. We're aware that things are, I think I might have muddled this up. Let me just have a quick go through that. So the first thing we have is unconscious incompetence, is when we don't know that we don't know. Then we have conscious incompetence, when we become aware that we don't know. Then we have conscious competence. That's when we start to go through it, like learning to drive a car, like learning to do something, so we're aware of what we don't know and we talk through it. And then the fourth one is unconscious competence. So when we have unconscious competence, that's when we can do it really well, and that's when we know that we're really good at something, because it becomes really easy and really fluid. What's interesting is, just to go back to me getting myself in a muddle, you can move very quickly between these when you become a little bit stressed and a little bit anxious. So obviously Facebook Live is something that is quite anxiety provoking for me and quite difficult. My emotions can build up, and actually I can move through these very quickly. So it's about being aware that we may be in one of these stages, but we actually go up and down and between those stages. When you do your mindfulness, at each one of these stages, you will notice something new and something different. So each one of these stages, when you practice your mindfulness, you will notice something new, you will notice something different. So the good thing about this is the more times you do mindfulness, the more things you practice with mindfulness, you'll start to notice different things. The final thing that I want to talk about, and I'll just end this video on that, is when we become really good at something, when we become really competent, we often do it in a mindless autopilot. Think about driving. Driving is a skill here that when you begin, you kind of don't know how much you need to learn about driving. You think, get in the car, drive, steer, and it's easy. Then you realise, gosh, I've got to think of brakes, indicators, other road users, signs on the road, and all the other things. And you think, gosh, I'm never going to get this. How am I going to remember mirror, signal, manoeuvre, clutch, accelerate, change gears? How do I know how to change gears? It's really loads of things. And eventually it all begins to fall into place, and you go to that competence where you have to concentrate. But after a couple of years of driving, many people enter this unconscious competence. They just get really good at it. They've done it so often, they're just in a bit of a mindless autopilot. And you can see that. If I say to you, you know, when you drive home or when you drove to work today, what did you pass? What did you drive past? You probably won't remember, because you do it so often and you're in this bit of an autopilot state. The danger, when we get really, really good at things, I'm not sure that's how you spell autopilot. When we get really good at things, you start to get mindless autopilot. And actually people start to forget that they don't know what they're doing, because they're just doing it without thinking. They're just doing it like that. And one of the reasons why mindfulness is helpful is because it really encourages you to step back and observe something as though it is the first time you're doing it. You have a beginner's awareness. So you look at everything as though it's new. And of course, when you start to do that, and you start to notice all those things that you took for granted and you did without thinking, you very much protect about the errors and mistakes from mindless autopilot. Everything I've talked about today is available in the PDF which is attached to this. Please download it. If you have any questions, as usual, please message me. Please let me know. If there's any topics that you'd like me to present in one of these videos, again, message me and we can do a video presentation on a topic of your choice. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found the video and the PDF useful. Thank you again for your time, and I hope you have a lovely day.